A savage prison riot leaves 14 dead, gangs hurl grenades, and gunfire echoes through Machala's cells. Streets erupt as Indigenous protesters torch police stations, block highways, and defy a nationwide emergency. At the same time, President Daniel Noboa battles a constitutional showdown and cartel violence spills over the border. A nation caught in a perfect storm of riots, protests, and narco-terror.
Mantenga ahí, mantenga ahí.
A prison riot caused by gang fighting in southern Ecuador has left 14 people dead and another 14 wounded. According to a local police chief, prisoners in the port town of Machala, south of Guayaquil, faced off with authorities on September 22nd, killing a guard and kidnapping officers. Police Chief William Calle told TV network Ecuavisa.
From the inside, they were shooting, throwing bombs and grenades. Some prisoners escaped, and 13 have been recaptured so far.
According to Calle, after about 40 minutes, authorities were able to retake control of the prison. Videos released by the police show heavily armed officers entering the prison to the sound of explosions. The dead inmates belonged to the rival Los Choneros and Los Lobos gangs, two of the biggest drug trafficking groups in Ecuador, which were designated as foreign terrorist organizations by the United States earlier this month. Gang wars have largely played out inside the country's prisons, where some 500 inmates have been killed since February 2021, often in gruesome fashion, their bodies dismembered and burnt. Ecuador's biggest prison massacre happened in 2021, when more than 100 inmates died in clashes in Guayaquil. Prisoners went live on social media to broadcast the violence, showing decapitated and charred bodies. Ecuador has been plagued by prison riots in recent years, with hundreds of inmates killed. The government of President Daniel Noboa, who has vowed to crack down on crime, attributes the clashes to gangs vying for territory and control. Organised crime has transformed Ecuador, a country of about 17 million, into one of the most violent nations in the world. Nestled between the globe's top two cocaine exporters, Colombia and Peru, Ecuador has seen violence spiral in recent years as rival gangs with ties to Mexican and Colombian cartels vie for control. Ecuador's government is grappling with simultaneous crises, nationwide protests, deadly prison violence, and a high-stakes constitutional dispute. On September 22nd, hundreds of Indigenous people and farmers blocked roads across the country with burning barricades and tree trunks. The demonstrations, led by the powerful Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, or CONAI, defied a 60-day state of emergency declared by President Daniel Noboa after he cut a $1.1 billion diesel subsidy. The removal raised fuel prices from $1.80 to $2.80 per gallon, sparking fears of higher living costs. In Otavalo, protesters set fire to the interior of a police station and nearby vehicles. In Pichincha province, chainsaws were used to clear felled trees, blocking key roadways as police maintained a heavy presence.
We must continue our resistance, which is why we are here today peacefully. We urge the military and police to take action. We ask that the government take action to address the needs of the indigenous people, both in rural and urban areas.
We will fight to the bitter end. First for our territory, our moorlands, our water. No to mining, yes to life, yes to water, yes to the moorlands, yes to food sovereignty, yes to life. That is why we fight, that is what we want.
Hours after a prison massacre in El Oro province along the Peruvian border, underscoring Ecuador's deepening security crisis. President Noboa's emergency order suspends freedom of assembly in 7 provinces and authorises police and military forces to prevent and dismantle public gatherings where threats to citizen security are identified. Seeking to outmaneuver the protesters, Noboa temporarily relocated the seat of government on September 15th to Latacunga in Cotopaxi province, a stronghold of indigenous activism. Political risk analyst Christian Carpio, speaking to BN Americas, said,
"The president played a very good game by moving the seat of government, because protests and mobilizations have traditionally been concentrated in Quito, where it's easier to unify disaffected sectors. Noboa dispersed the protesters' organizational capacity. Apparently the government is managing the protests well."
Meanwhile, a constitutional confrontation is unfolding. On September 19th, Noboa issued a decree calling for a referendum to form a Constituent Assembly to replace the 2008 Constitution. The Constitutional Court provisionally suspended the decree, prompting Noboa to repeal and resubmit it. The court has 20 days to decide whether the initiative can proceed. Separately, the National Electoral Council is preparing a November 16th referendum on two issues: whether to allow foreign military bases in Ecuador and whether to end the state's obligation to allocate funds from the national budget to political organisations. With street protests, a prison massacre and constitutional battles all converging, President Daniel Noboa faces one of the most turbulent weeks of his administration and an early test of his government's resilience. Meanwhile, Mexico is reeling from a brutal crime with international resonance. On September 22, 2025, authorities in the state of Mexico confirmed the discovery of dismembered human remains believed to belong to Colombian artists Byron Sanchez Salazar and Juan Luis Herrera, known professionally as B-King and Regio Clown. The two musicians had been missing since September 16th, when they were last seen leaving a gym in Mexico City's upscale Polanco district. The murders underscore Mexico's security crisis, where migrants, artists, and foreign visitors can be targeted by organized crime. According to El Financiero and officials from the State of Mexico Attorney General's office, the remains were found alongside a message signed by La Familia Michoacana, a violent Mexican cartel. Although the Attorney General's office has not yet issued a final identification report, the evidence strongly supports the link to the missing Colombians. In Colombia, families and supporters are demanding justice and urgent diplomatic coordination to repatriate the remains. The killings have also reignited attention on La Nueva Familia Michoacana, considered by US authorities to be one of Mexico's most violent drug trafficking groups. The US Treasury sanctioned LNFM under Executive Order 1459 in November 2022, and in February 2025, the State Department escalated measures by designating it a foreign terrorist organization and a specially designated global terrorist entity. Washington identifies brothers Johnny and Jose Alfredo Hurtado Olascoaga, known as Los Peques, as LNFM's top leaders, responsible for drug trafficking, extortion, and overseeing armed hitmen. Other sanctioned figures include Ubaldo Hurtado Olascoaga, linked to illegal mercury and uranium exploitation, and Adita Hurtado Olascoaga, accused of laundering money through used clothing stores in Texas and trafficking weapons. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has warned that America will blow up foreign crime groups if necessary, suggesting possible collaboration with regional allies. Speaking in Spanish, he added that Washington may even consider reinstalling a US military base in Ecuador if formally requested.
If they help us with that, we are willing to consider it, referring to the possibility of reinstalling a US military base in Ecuador. Obviously, it's a decision made by the Department of Defense and the President, but we will consider it because if we're asked, it's coming from an ally and a friend, and it's a very strategic location. But obviously, as a sovereign country, they have to invite us. It has to be something formal. But we will consider it very closely.
In a separate remark, Rubio stressed that the US can now share intelligence without restriction.
Now, we can provide information without any limitation on how the government of Ecuador wants to use it. If it's with a terrorist group, they are terrorists, and we can help them confront those terrorist groups.